There we go. All right, cool. So, guys, we have David Manning here, currently of the Atlanta Blaze. He actually used to be high school rivals of mine, and then also club ball teammates, which is pretty cool.
Yep.
So, David, I'd love to just have you start off and talk to us about your experiences going from North Carolina to college, the highest level of college, and then now playing pro lacrosse.
Yeah. First off, guys, I'm pumped to be speaking to you. Just being a North Carolina boy myself, it's a little different talking to you guys. Not that I care a little more, but it just feels great to seeing, lacrosse grow in the triangle and how good lacrosse has gotten. Chandler said it, we played club ball back in the day together. We grew up. So when I was going through middle school, I started as a sixth grader. It's mainly because my older brother started playing. And so Chandler's dad, your coach Zirkle's dad, was actually my brother's high school coach. And so I was coming in around a time where, for North Carolina lacrosse, like Chapel Hill and East Chapel Hill were kind of the two premier teams in the state. And we got to see some unreal players, Tony Mendez, Scott Meyer, Gates Benson, Wally. Like, there were some amazing players that, Chandler and I throughout middle school got to look up to. And so I think my passion for lacrosse kind of stemmed from that was watching those East Chapel Hill games, back in 2006, 2007. And, from there, that's when I dreamed about playing, college lacrosse. And so that's when my commitment really started. I ended up not going to East Chapel Hill, went to Chapel Hill, which was a great choice. Go Tigers. But got to Chapel Hill. I think, the biggest thing I learned, now that I've kind of seen other areas play lacrosse and I've gotten out of the scope of North Carolina is, just the way we play the game in North Carolina, it's different. I think the stereotype is down south, we're probably a little more athletic, a little less skilled, but we can absolutely compete with anybody else on the field. And I think, throughout high school, it was definitely a more physical game that Chandler and I grew up playing. I don't know what the case is now, but there weren't just straight lacrosse players really back in the day. We had football players out there, basketball players, soccer players, and it was just a physical game. It's different from the way, college players play it now and the high schools up north where it's very much skill-based and kind of finesse. It was gritty back in North Carolina during those days. So I think that gave me a great physical edge to bring into college. You guys probably don't know my game, but Chandler will attest to this. I am not the fastest kid. And so I had to develop games where, I was a great communicator off ball. I learned my angles really well behind the net. I was able to slide hard and be a presence in there. So even though I didn't have speed, I was able to, kind of add some things to my game that allowed me to be successful at the next level. So played at Chapel Hill High, went to a few state championships, and then headed up to Loyola. So I committed, senior year, summer going to my senior year, went up to Baltimore, came in at a great time. Came into a team that we ended up winning the national championship my freshman year. And I learned a ton of things from this team, which we can talk about later. But the biggest thing is, being disciplined, is something that I really took from that year, just because that was the emphasis on the coaching staff. And our team was able to really come together. And if you don't know the story, prior to 2012, there's only a few teams that ever won the national championship in lacrosse. And we were an outside top 20 in that preseason coming in with kind of a chip on our shoulder. And we went 18-1. We tied Duke for the best record in NCAA lacrosse. Our only loss came to freaking Johns Hopkins in overtime. But we ended up winning the national championship that year. And that was a great experience. So moving forward from that, I think the biggest thing was coming after that year was I was the only freshman that didn't touch the field. Everybody else had got some playing time, and that kind of fueled me for that summer going into where I put in a lot of work in my game and becoming, a 2.5-year starter at Loyola. And eventually moving on to playing professional lacrosse, which wasn't initially my plan. I think growing up, you don't really dream about playing professional lacrosse. It's college, which you see most of the exposure. And That's what you end up watching most of. But I think just playing, after college, Chandler will attest to this. Like anytime you can get on the field and keep playing this wonderful game, like you're going to keep doing it. And I'm hitting 27 right now, going to my 5th season. And I've already had 4 knee surgeries, a host of other problems with my body, but like I won't quit because I love this game so much. And I can continue to try to play it just for as long as possible. But that's kind of a snapshot of my journey coming from, just a North Carolina kid, started playing in 6th grade, fell in love with the sport. I committed to it. I mean, I worked out, I trained hard in high school to give myself an opportunity at the college level. And every time that opportunity came up, I kept seizing it. And that's the biggest thing. I mean, you guys are going to have opportunities come your way in high school and, later in life. It's really just about how you make the most of those opportunities in life.
Yeah, that's really great insight. For the guys who don't know David, I think it's clear to say he's probably one of the hardest workers I know. In high school, I don't know if you remember this, we did those training sessions at the University of North Carolina. It was like after high school. So we get done with our day, we go over to UNC around like 4:30, and we train with this guy named Steve Gessman. Is that right? Gisselman, who, by the way, I saw running in a trail in Chapel Hill recently.
I know he's back in town.
It was crazy to see. Didn't say hi, but we made eye contact and we realized we knew each other, but kept running. But David would always show up at these things, and he pushed more weight than anybody. And it felt like Steve had to make you stop at times when me and my teammates wanted to end. You were always continuing to go, which is, it makes a lot of sense now that we look back at it, that you were the one who went on to play, college and, pro ball at the level you did. So you talked a little bit about coming from North Carolina. What types of things did you have to learn when you went from playing, the kind of brutal style of lacrosse that we play down here to going to Maryland, playing D1? Like, what types of things did you have to take and recreate in your game to be able to, get on the field at a D1 college?
I think the biggest part of my game that developed once I got to college was learning how to break down lacrosse film. It's something we would do before every practice. We would watch 30 minutes of the previous day's practice, and you would get called out on film. I mean, I'm sure coaches told you film does not lie. It doesn't hide anything, right? You get exposed. And so it's being able to take a critical eye at yourself in your own game and kind of see what you're doing wrong, learn how to break it down, and learn how to learn from that, and then visualize going into the next practice the correct way to do it and respond in that way. Right. I think that's what really opened up my game, because there's all little things that, you get better at with the more reps you do. And then, you get thrown into higher level competition, you're going to get better. And so obviously my speed got better, my stick skills, all that got better just practicing. But I would say learning how to really break down film and take away the right lessons from it. I mean, a lot of times, when I'm watching film, my high school kids, they're just watching it to enjoy it, which is great too. I mean, it's a beautiful game. Watch it, for fun sometimes. But there are other times where if you find a player on that, one of the opposing teams that you want to kind of model your game after, like you kind of match up to them physically, kind of the same way, kind of the same speed, more or less the same dodges or skill set. Look at every little thing they do, write notes, start visualizing yourself doing that exact same moves, and go out and practice that. That's really the only way to get better. And I would say just learning how to break that down and what to identify in film was probably the biggest aspect to my game that I added at the college level.
Man, that's huge. I see some kids on here right now that actually go to my high school or my high school that I coach at, and we have our film sessions too. And it's a lot of fun to, make them stop and get off their phone for a little while and actually watch what's going on. And we saw more and more success as we actually took those things a little more seriously. So that's a great point you make. So talking about being a defenseman, what are the characteristics that you've seen that make a really good, a high level defenseman?
So, I mean, you look at some of the top defensemen in the game right now, and that's, Tucker Durkin, Joe Fletcher, Scott Ratliff, Matt Reese, whoever those Maryland guys are. You kind of put them side by side and you evaluate their game. They all have different, attributes that they are really strong at. But the biggest common denominator is that they have an incredible sense of urgency. Everything they do is at 100% intensity. and they're working to get in and out, on ball, off ball, get 6 up and pass line. Everything they do, all right, is at a really high intensity. And that's something that I find, like, if you want to be successful out there, I mean, especially as a defenseman, because you really can't take a second off, because sometimes it's that extra 6 inches or that extra second of you hustling to get in where you can maybe pick off a skip pass or get the hands and disrupt a pass or a shot. If you have that great sense of urgency, good things are going to happen. And I haven't seen one, pro teammate or somebody that's really been successful in that position that hasn't had that sense of urgency. It's got to be on every single second that you're playing.
Right. So kind of building from that, like you talked about like the individual players. And I remember watching you when you were at Loyola, especially your senior year. It felt like you did a really good job of like covering your man, and it felt like you were directing the defense. At least, I specifically watched you because I knew you, and I thought it was really cool to see somebody that I knew, right? But what does it take to be like a good defensive unit? Like a group of 7 guys playing defense together, like what does that take to be at the most elite level?
Yeah. You got to know each other really well. So I think the best units I were on is when I could look to my left, to my right, and I would know how every single one of them is going to play a certain situation. So I can anticipate their reactions, and then I would respond in kind and fill in the gaps and get their backs. I mean, you have 7 people and you only have 1 guy guarding the ball. I mean, 6 guys have to be kind of orchestrated off ball and be ready to go and support every single person on the field. And so the best units are the ones that care about each other and they get each other's backs. And so obviously, I mean, it's drilled into every single kid. I mean, communication is where that starts and where that relationship starts, not only on the field, but off the field. So having a great relationship with your defensive teammates, communicating through situations, and then having that sense of urgency, you cover all those things, you're going to make it really tough for the offense to try to get a good look on the goal. Just doing those 2 things.
So I guess I get building on this because it's a great line of, questioning. I find that the younger you get with kids, the tougher it is for communication to happen. I'm not sure what it's like at your high school program, but, for mine, getting kids to talk is tough. Even at the club level, when you got kids who play at the highest level of each high school, even then getting kids just to talk to each other is like a challenge. Like, how did you go about learning to talk? How did you like learn to embrace it? Is there any trick that you would give or advice you would give for kids who, might be silent on the field and, get lost? They might be good on ball, but get lost in the flow of things because they're not talking with their defense.
Yeah, I remember, I think it was out like the Duke Snowflake tournament that we used to go to in the summers of school. I remember Coach Danowski sitting us down and talking about how they had a defenseman at Duke who wasn't the most talented individual, but he was so good at communicating, getting the rest of the defense on the same page, he earned a starting spot. And that, I don't know, for whatever reason, kind of just stuck in my mind because communication it's not really a talent. I mean, it's not like you have that 4.3 speed that you're just born with. Like everybody can talk, everybody can communicate. It's kind of just understanding that when you're playing that you should be talking the entire time. And things that I've done with my high school kids that they hate is, sub segments where we're playing 6-on-6. I make my entire defense come up with a song they all know the lyrics to, and they all have to sing that song throughout playing, just so they get in the habit of always talking when they're out there. But I'd say the best my communication got, or the reason why I think I'm one of the better communicating defensemen out there in the field, is because I injured myself a ton in college. I mean, I had 4 knee surgeries before my 5th year. So I was really limited physically, but I knew I could be a great communicator on the field to make sure everybody's in the right spot. We're all on the same page. We know what the slide package is. We know how we're defending certain key individuals out in the field based on our scouting report. And I could be that presence and affect the team in that way. I knew I wasn't going to be the great one-on-one defender that I thought I could be before these knee surgeries, but I could be the best communicator and best off-ball defenseman. And sometimes, when I'm, right now, as I'm getting prepared for, the MLL season that's hopefully taking place in a month or so, I'll watch game film and I'll start talking to myself and talking out loud about, if I'm the inside guy, who's hot, who's 2, all right, where are we rotating from? Okay, where's the skip pass? Who do we have to recover to? I'll just start talking to myself, watching other people play, just because it gets me into that kind of game-like situation, and I get those reps in. Because obviously MLL, we're not practicing every day. You got to come in, you got to be ready to play right away. So I have to do those kind of mental reps on my own, and that's another way to use film. as just doing that and kind of talking on your own to figure it out. But I think, you kind of said it, these younger players, they may not be as good at communicating. Sometimes it's because they don't know what to say. And that's okay. I think even the more you talk and sometimes you say the wrong thing, that's when you can get corrected and you can learn from it. Oftentimes, when you're unsure of yourself, you kind of just close your mouth and you go quiet. Keep talking, keep being loud. I mean, everybody knows what a hot and a two is, but if you don't know the right rotations, say something out loud, maybe somebody will correct you. But it's just being willing to communicate is the biggest part.
Yeah. No, I totally am. As a coach, I'm totally with you. As a former slow athlete myself, I'm right on board in terms of how to get playing time by being the guy who knows what's going on in the field.
Exactly.
That's huge. So for players who are listening, this would be a great time for you to start dropping questions into the group chat. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say, what you guys want to know from David, whether that be about just playing pro lacrosse or defensive technique, anything like that. I think that'd be great. I'll go ahead and ask you just because you've been on, multiple championship teams. Like, what are the things that those teams have in common?
Yeah.
Like, how do you become, the best team at the level that you play at?
So, yeah, it's about discipline. I mean, it's about becoming the term family gets thrown around in team sports a lot, but there are very rare occasions where I think of my teammates as my families in the years that we really came together in kind of that regard. I'm thinking about that 2012 Loyola team. I mean, we just had a massive chip on our shoulder. We felt disrespected. That fall was tough. I mean, there were articles about it. I think we did more running than any other Division I team out there. And it was about the little things. I mean, we had a really strict coach, Dan Shamati, who's the head coach at University of Richmond now. He's our offensive coordinator. And he's really, set that, kind of the tone. Every foot was behind the line on every sprint. You got 5 minutes early to every, training session. Before we got on practice, 100 left, 100 right off the wall. Just little things, little details that we all had to do together. And not just our coaches holding us accountable. We held each other accountable because we wanted to be successful. So I think once you get there as a team where, you kind of have that common goal in mind and you understand that goal every single day and you don't let anybody else sacrifice that for the team. I mean, I don't know if you guys are watching The Last Dance, but the 2 episodes that came out last night about how Jordan held all of his other teammates to such a high expectation. Like, that's what you have to do, every single one of you. I mean, if you want to win championships, you can't be ordinary. You got to be, it's got to be a little extraordinary about the way you handle and, hold yourselves and the expectations you have for each other. And so I think the biggest thing we did, on those championship teams was, we dreamed big, but we worked hard and we held each other accountable. It doesn't matter who you were, the best player on the team or the worst player. If your foot was on the line, you're getting called out by somebody. It was about doing things the right way.
All right, you got me fired up. I'm ready to get on the field right now and go play. That's awesome. All right, so I got a question here from one of our players. So I'm going to change the question a little bit. The question initially is, how can I help and hurt the defense as a goalie? But I'd love to hear you answer that question, but also talk about your relationship with goalies and how goalies make you better as a defenseman and how you try to make the goalie better as a player.
Yeah. I've always had a special relationship with my goalie. Because if I mess up, they're taking a hard shot, and they're in a really tough position. I mean, I'm not jealous of being a goalie at all. That's not something that's for me. So I think, what was the question? I'm blanking on how to respond to this.
So how can I help and hurt the defense as a goalie? And then also, like, for you, how do you, help make the goalie's life easier? Or are there things that the goalie does that can make, I'm assuming that the goalie talking to you can be helpful.
Yeah, I think it's being organized, and it depends on the goalie, right? So I play with goalies that are great communicators. I play with goalies that are great shot stoppers and others that are great at clearing the ball. They all have kind of different attributes. I think what I love the most about goalies is the ones that communicate the best, because that just helps out the entire defense. But another thing I see, like what I told my junior goalie this year, who's kind of a leader in my defense, is it's really important about the way you respond if things don't go right as the goalie. If you let in a goal and you respond with anger and frustration and you kind of lose your cool a little bit, that trickles down to the rest of the defense. You have to be that calming presence where if a goal comes in, you bring all 6 other guys out on the field, you come into a huddle, you talk about what, mistake there was and how to correct it. No pointing fingers, but just establishing as a unit, we got to do this next time. All right. And then break from the huddle and just go on to get the next stop. You always have to be that calming and kind of soothing voice for the defense. If you're a goalie, that's a tough leadership position you got to be in. But I think, every goalie that I played for that's been really successful is they've always been encouraging, and don't let, small mistakes or goals kind of just throw off the entire team. It's always about the next stop and the next play.
Right. So I've always been curious about this because, I, as an attackman or offensive player, never really had to talk about the play that was going on during a huddle that we got scored on. But like, what's it like when you go into one of those huddles, and how do you, I know you talk a little bit about watching film, but how do you break down what happened in the moment and say, hey, this is what we're going to do differently next time? Like, how do you go about that?
So you need everybody's eyes because everybody has a different vantage point on the field. So, somebody that's 2 passes away may see something different from the person that was guarding the ball initially. And so it takes an open dialogue. Everybody's got to kind of chime in. They can't hold on to their own thoughts and opinions. It's really just a unit trying to break down, everybody's viewpoint, what really happened on that play and what could we do better to stop that next time.
Right.
But it takes 7 guys talking and having a conversation, not just 1 or 2.
Right. No, that's super helpful. We got some great questions rolling in here. So one I'm going to take, the initial question is, how should I play defense on the ride as an attack? So can you talk a little bit about what you don't like when an attackman does to try and take the ball from you? And also talk about, for a defenseman, what's it like to handle the ball and the best ways to get out up the field? Before you do that, as you think, I'll just let everyone know, David in high school had one of the best face dodges. He burned me so many times clearing the ball. And again, as we talked about, I was rather slow. So as soon as he did the one wipe across his face, beat me every single time. It seemed like a pretty effective way to clear the ball. And honestly, for the first 2 years of high school, you guys beat us by like 10, 12 points every single time. So he was clearly part of one of the best teams out there in the state of North Carolina I've ever seen. And he had a phenomenal face dodge. So he's one person to talk to about clearing the ball here. So take it away, bud.
Well, yeah, that was based on me not being fast enough to just outrun people. So I did have to make a couple dodges in there. But I would say –
I was for your highlight tape. That's what I was there. I was just trying to make it look like you could clear the ball. That's what
that was before the highlight tape age came out, man. I didn't have one of those.
There you go.
I would say, what I hate the most, about clearing the ball is, when attackman is just aggressive on the ride. And I think, coach probably told you this, as soon as you guys turn the ball over, the defense gets it. That's your time to, get back at them for all the slap checks, the slashes that they give you. You should be aggressive to get on their hands and try to turn them over, and inflict a little bit of pain on those defensemen. I hate it when a attackman is just hustling to get to me, try to get to hands, try to turn me back, make a bad pass. So honestly, that's just grit. That's just going 100%, not moping after a potential turnover that you made. Just looking at, there's potential to get that ball back in the ride, especially at the high school level. And something we always used to stress, for our attackmen is, ride hard and make them throw longer passes than they have to. Make them redirect it across the field as many times as possible because there's a greater chance of that ball going to the feet or sailing over the head. And the more you can do that when you're on hands and, making them pass under duress, more chances that ball is, going to be turned over and you get the possession again. Defensively, the one thing I'm looking for is a lot of space. I mean, I need my other teammates to get out, get to their spots, run the clear effectively because if 1 or 2 guys are in the wrong place or they're bunched up next to each other, those just aren't outlets that I can make anymore. So the biggest thing is, getting out, getting wide, whatever your clear is, usually, those 2 defensemen are getting out to the wings. One guy's probably going to the box or opposite box. Just getting good spacing. And every time, you pass the ball or catch the ball, you always have to be looking upfield because when you're trying to clear the ball, really you're trying to look for those middies up the midfield line. So especially those 2 wing defensemen, every time you catch the ball or pass the ball to your goalie or redirect it over the field, you should be taking a look upfield, kind of surveying, seeing where that next opportunity could be for that middy to get open. That's something I stress a ton to my guys. Every time you catch, look upfield, pass the ball, look upfield, figure out the situation beforehand.
Right. So how important are your stick skills to your game? Like how much time do you spend like right now getting ready for the MLL season? How much time do you spend like on the wall or whatever?
I mean, you can't hit the wall enough, even at my level. It just kind of gets you in motion and in sync. I mean, I would say I'm not making adjustments on my form, but I'm just keeping a stick in my hands and being creative. I think the more you do that, I mean, especially at your age when you're trying to get comfortable, with both hands and, be able to perform, passes, shots, dodges, all the same lefty and righty, the more you have a stick in your hands, the better. And for me, even, going into my 5th year playing professional lacrosse, I'm still doing that. I'm still hitting the wall every single day. I'm still doing ground ball work. I'm doing all the basic stuff. None of that changes.
Right. Yeah. I mean, as a coach, when you're teaching your team to ride, if you find a defenseman that can't handle the ball, I mean, sometimes in high school, what we try to do or with our, teams is we try and identify the one person that can't handle the ball and leave that guy open and make them pass it to him. And then you jump him on the ride and make him complete a pass. And if that kid doesn't have stick skills, man, you get the ball back right away.
Exactly.
So, your hope is that you have the ability as a defenseman that you can play a little offense and push the ball up the field. Thanks for that. That's obviously great stuff. I have a couple questions here from attackmen about what you as a defenseman are looking for in an attackman when you're trying to take the ball away from them. And, what is the biggest weakness that you see in an attackman that you try to key on when you're guarding somebody?
That's going to change with every single matchup. And so I think, at the college level is a little bit different than the high school, where we have tons and tons of film and scouting reports on every single player. So I can look at their tendencies. I know exactly what they're doing. I can break down every move they do on the field. So I'm prepared for it. At the high school level, it's a little difficult because you don't have all that film on teams. Sometimes you're just showing up, especially, at the travel level, you're just showing up and you're playing. And so I think, after the first few plays, you really got to look at their tendencies and what they're doing well. And so you try to cover that up and then you try to expose their weaknesses, whatever that is. Maybe they don't have a great first step. Maybe, they're always looking to change direction at GLE and try to get under. Well, what am I trying to do there? Am I trying to turn them and allow them to get underneath me at GLE, or am I trying to just push them up and away and get them away from the cage? There's all these small adjustments you have to make, but it really depends on what that specific attackman's tendencies are. There's not, one or two glaring things that always comes out. Every player has great aspects to their games and weaknesses. So you kind of just have to be able to identify that. And the quicker you can do that, the better you can maximize and, take advantage of that on the field, the next rep, the next quarter, whatever.
Right. So I got a question here from a Chapel Hill High School attackman.
Let's go.
Yeah, throwing this back to you from George Saltis. It's actually from Kimberly Saltis, but I'm assuming that George is the one watching this here. Basically, I'm going to boil the question down. But what's the most effective way for an offense to attack a defense? Like, what's the best way for an offense to score? What's the toughest thing for you to guard as either just a player or as a team defense?
Yeah. So my defensive philosophy is all about limiting the best look on the cage that there is, which is right in front where you get this 6x6 look. That's the best. That's the widest the goal is ever going to be. When you're right in front, you have that 6x6 area to kind of shoot at. I want to limit that as a defenseman. So that's why, when you're guarding somebody at the midfield, you're cutting the alley and forcing them down the alley, because if they blow past you to the middle of the field, that's where they get that 6x6 area. So I think attackman, if you're trying to look, or just offensively, how to break down a defense, you want that high percentage shot. You want that shot right in front of the cage. Well, how do you get it there? Is the defense really bad about 1v1 defense? Can you blow past them, initially and get that shot off, right then and there? Or, maybe you have to draw a slide. Maybe the defense isn't good at, protecting skip lanes or getting 2s and 3 rotations in. So you can look through the defense more and set up that opportunity. But I always think, like, the best shot on lacrosse is right in front. So whether that's you beating the guy off initial dodge, the top midi alley and getting to that look, or, you initiating behind to draw the eyes of the defense, they ball watch, somebody back cuts, simple pass, quick stick right in front of the cage. That's another great shot. It's just about, defensively trying to limit those opportunities and force them to bad areas of the field. But offensively, what's the highest percentage shot right from the cage? How do we get it there?
Right. No, that's great. I think think some of these guys will love hearing the defensive side of that because I think everything you just said are the things that, as a coach, I try and get our offense to do.
Yeah.
In terms of taking high percentage shots and not, just chucking it from the outside and trying to get lucky. Let me ask you this. This is a great question from Cooper Alexander from J.H. Rose in Greenville, North Carolina. How do you guard someone who's a better athlete than you? And then specifically, he wants to know about guarding someone who's a better athlete from up top. This is a great question for you.
Whew. Well, so from up top, obviously, a lot more difficult, right? Below GLE, below the cage, you can play angles really well as a defenseman. Up top, it's a little more difficult, a lot more open field. That's where speed really kind of is a predominant factor about who wins that matchup. But I would say just even your initial angle of approach. You break down a lot of games and you kind of see what the causes of goals are. A lot of times, it's just the initial approach is bad. So I'd always say you need to know where you're trying to force them to the field. If they're a really good athlete and they're faster than you, well, do they only have one hand or do they have both? If they're a straight righty and, they're in that top left of the midfield trying to go down the righty alley, well, maybe I square up with them and make them go left and make them arc around the field. Even if that's giving them the middle, I'm taking them to an area where they're not very strong in that hand. So they're not going to have a good opportunity to make a pass or a shot under duress. It's tough. I mean, with somebody that's faster, story of my freaking life about going against people that are faster than me. It's about angles and it's about, making sure you have that stick out in front. Like we always talk about as defensemen, use that 6 feet, use that 6 foot buffer, throw that poke check right as they're trying to dodge to make them dodge farther out. That buys you time to drop step, understand which way they go, and then get to hips and drive them away. If you play with that stick at your hip, and it's not out in front, they can dodge out, much closer inside of you, all right? Less time for you to react and respond and get, your feet moving in the right way. So maximizing those 6 feet that you get, as a long pole defenseman, having the right initial angle of approach, and knowing that, that specific player's tendencies. If they're great righty and they're not good lefty, force them to their left. Make them a weak-handed player. They can't use their speed to beat you then, and just kind of stay on that trail and make sure they can't go back to their right.
Right.
There's a lot of different ways to kind of go about that, but angle approach is always important. You should always know how you're approaching to everybody on the field, and why you're doing that.
So yeah, that's great knowledge for our younger guys. I really like the thing you're talking about with knowing your opponent. It feels like every answer that you've given us so far has been to come back to knowing who you're playing against. If you're in high school, your team has huddle and you can watch film or any other service that lets you watch film. Watch games and try and figure out, what teams are doing, what the guy you're going against is going to do. And then, also look at yourself and see what ways you could find to, create an advantage or find an advantage. You just talked a little bit about angle of approach. And I was wondering if you could just boil that down for the younger guys out here. It seems like my coaching experience and my playing experience, that wasn't something that was ever really touched on in our level of high school back in the day. When I got to college, it was the number one thing we did, like all the time. And now, now in high school, it seems like we're starting it a little bit, but it's one of those little details that's not necessarily been always accepted by high school and middle school players.
Right. And so how I kind of describe, how I want to play defense, where I want to force them is wherever the offensive player that has the ball, there's always a short way and a long way for them to get to that 6x6 area of the cage. All right. So I'm going to try to draw, bear with me here.
All right.
But that's my net, right? So the net is facing up here. Okay. Right. If they're in that top lefty alley, this guy has the ball. Okay. They're in that top left alley. The quickest way for them to get to the front of the cage is straight through the middle here. So as a defenseman, all right, I want to take them the longest way to get to this front of the cage. So I'm going to cut the field, make them go down the alley. If they want to get to the front of the cage, they have to wrap all the way around, beat me top side at the other end of the net. Okay, so I'm always trying to make that offensive player go the longest route to get to the front of the net. All right, does a few things for me. Allows my defense more time to set up their slide package. All right, they know where they're going. All right, they go the longest way around the net. All right, more time for us to figure out who our hot guy is, get a 2, get a 3 pre-rotated down, and be ready to send him. And also, every time you make him go the longest route, they're not getting to that great look. And every step they take down the alley, their angle at the net is getting worse and worse and worse. You look below the net, okay, right? So if it's like bottom right, I think, okay, you take away top side, right? Easiest way is for them to go this way, blow past you top side to get to the front of the net. Make them go the longest route. Make them take a lot more time. I know high school doesn't have a shot clock, but still, I mean, you don't want that offense scoring on you in 15, 20 seconds. Make them earn that. Make them have a minute or two possessions if they really want to get past you.
Yeah. Hey, that's huge. I really, really appreciate you adding that on, because I think that's something that our guys are going to learn a lot from. So talk about approaches. I got a kid here named Duncan who wants to know, what's your takeaway move, or what types of things do you try to look for in an attackman or the guy that you're guarding that you use to, get the ball back for your team?
At the high school level, my go-to takeaway was an over the head check. That got beat out of me quick going to the college level. I would say my go-to now is really just one-handed pokes and digs. Because you're not losing position when you do that. And you have this 6-foot pole, and then you have this extra reach when you do a one-handed poke or a dig check where you can try to get in between their stick and their body. So if my stick's in here and they try to cradle back, all right, that ball is coming out. That's a college turnover. And that just takes with matching feet and then being able to time their cradle, okay, and figure out when to throw that poke in there to disrupt that stick. I would say poke checks are my number one go-to. Every time I come out on ball, I'm throwing a poke at the bottom hand. Every time I'm coming in, even if the guy doesn't have the ball, I'm probably throwing my stick in to get, a touch on their stick so they know they're covered inside. But even just running east-west with kids or down the alley when they're about to shoot, like a one-handed can opener check to get that bottom hand off their stick is huge.
Right.
I do more of that. I don't – even like slap checks I don't do as much as I did in high school, because mainly if I'm in tight and there's a time to do a slap check, A, a lift is probably better, and B, I should probably be at hips and driving them away from the cage anyways. I don't do slap checks all that much anymore, unless they're about to pass it. I'm trying to break a wrist, but that's a little different intent.
For sure. I mean, I think one of the things that I've learned in coaching and just playing and seeing the game more and more is that the highest level defensemen tend to throw more quick checks and disruptive pokes, like you're talking about. I remember a couple summers ago, we had a defenseman who was borderline Division I, Division II. And the feedback that he ended up getting at the end of the summer was that you don't throw enough poke checks and you're not disruptive enough. And it really was just the difference in him breaking down with his hands kind of back behind him and out in front, or trying to get to being out in front and actually being in the hands. So I think what you're saying is spot on right there. Let's see. So when a school is looking for a defenseman, all right, a college team is looking for a defenseman, what exactly are they looking for? And this is from Hatcher from Carborough High School. So you got another local kid.
Not Hatcher. That depends. The Loyola way was, this comes from Coach Toomey himself. We have to have a number one on-ball defenseman, and we have to have a cover off-ball guy. And so you want that skilled one-on-one matchup that's going to take the ball away, that you're going to rely on. Maybe you're down a goal in 2 minutes, that you're going to be the go-to guy to take the ball away. Then you have to have somebody that's off ball, that's a great communicator, that can slide, be a physical presence. And then that third guy can be either or. I mean, and so it's a tough question because there's so many ways. I mean, it really depends on the coach and what the needs of the team are and how their style of play defensively. Like Notre Dame plays a different style of defense than Loyola does. And just basically that's college at college. But I think – when you break down what you're really good at, like I always say, like my kids, like we're going to minimize your weaknesses so we can maximize your strengths and rely on your strengths. So whatever you do really well at, rely on that. And if there's anything like any glaring weaknesses in your game, improve enough where you can't see those on the field, and then you can just rely on your strengths. But college is going to recruit the player that you are based on the defense they want to run and what they need at that position. So that's going to go from being a great, takeaway artist to a great transition player or a great cover and physical guy. There's a lot of different great attributes about defensemen that you can have that you'll get recruited on.
Right. I think what you just talked about is huge. We did a Q&A with some of our former Hilltoppers a a week back or so. We had a Division I guy, Division II guy, Division III guy, and a club guy just to talk about all the different levels. And one of the things that came up about learning to get on the field in college was to figure out what you're good at, and to maximize that and try and maximize or improve on your weaknesses enough that those aren't hurting you when you're on the field.
Exactly.
But it's really key to know that you got a pro guy echoing the exact same thing we heard from other high level college guys earlier on. So definitely, if you're listening to this, take that away. So let's see. I got a question from a coach here who, I'll be honest, he's not a big fan of offensive midfielders. When we break down and do drills and practice, he's always trying to get some of the offensive guys to come play defense with him. But what's your relationship like with the offensive midfielders, especially when they get onto the defensive end in the games? And what's the best way to bring those guys into the fold to make sure that they're part of your defense?
That's always a scary moment. Always is. When you get caught in transition, you get one of those middies caught stuck on defense. That's where communication's huge because they have no idea what's going on. When we break up O time, D time in practices, maybe like once a week or once every 2 weeks, they're down just kind of learning from us. They don't have the reps. So a lot of times you just got to make sure they're hustling and going 100%. And then if they need to be somewhere, they're not going to know it intuitively. So you as, that off-ball defenseman, if you're a pass or two passes away, you got to communicate with them. Just cover yourself. I mean, you're relying on an midi to know defense. They're just not going to make the right play if you're not telling them exactly what to do.
Right.
So that's where communication's huge. I mean, just talk them through situations. Hopefully you can get them off the field as fastly as possible. And they only have to deal with that once in a game. But,
right.
I mean, those are tough situations. It's just communicate through it. Try to get a stop and just get them off.
All right. So another situation that comes up in a game, man down defense. Yeah. What is your approach to man down defense? I'm sure you've been on many different teams. You've played it many different ways. What's your favorite way to guard man down, and what types of stuff are you trying to do?
Look, I think if you're trying to evaluate whether or not a defense for a team is good or not, you look at their man down defense. I mean, when you are a man down, you have to scramble against a man advantage. That puts every defensive fundamental underneath the microscope. You have to communicate well. You have to be sprinting in and out to get the hands to get back in the passing lane to fill in a rotation. Sticks have to be up in the passing lanes and the skip lanes and potentially, pick one of those off during a man-up possession. So all those little things, they're under a greater microscope because you're man down. And so you have to be rotating quick. You have to get out the hands quickly. I think it really depends on what style of game you're playing, whether or not there's a shot clock or not. But at the high school level, for me, depending on what sets, I'll do a box one. There's advantage to everything. So a box and one is going to take away, the inside presence and not allow them to have a crease shot. But you're giving up an outside opportunity because you have one in and four on the outside trying to guard five guys. You're going to get out-rotated and you're going to get a step-down shot potentially. That's probably the look you're going to give up in a box and one. If you do a five-man rotation, that's where you probably deter that outside shot a little more, but you're kind of, somebody else is coming in to take away the crease presence before releasing that other guy to go out into the perimeter and rotate. So that crease presence might be open every now and then. So depending on what man down defense you're running, you may be giving them a different look at the cage. So it really depends on what their man up unit's like. If they're great outside shooters, well, maybe do a five-man rotation to get the hands to cover that up. If they're great at feeding it inside to that guy on the crease and man up, well, maybe a box and one is a better option and just keeping somebody on the crease shutting him off.
Right on. No, that's all really helpful stuff. I think the middle school contingent here is probably not going to understand that as much as the high schoolers. But I think that's really, that's key information. And it sounds like it's coming back to again, communication, the sense of urgency that you talked about, what that makes a good team, and just knowing where to be. I think those are all huge things. So I got another question here from George Saltis. And guys, we got about 15 minutes left. So if you have other questions that have not been asked yet, fill them in here. And I think George just wants to go one-on-one with you at this point. He's asking so many great questions. I think he just needs the real deal next time you're up here in Chapel Hill. But what's the best way for an attackman to protect the stick while also trying to square up and dodge you? Were there any moves that attackman did that tend to get you?
Yeah, there's a lot of moves that tend to get me. Really depends on the player. I think it's always just keeping it kind of back into that shoulder so you're protecting. I think the more that you kind of dangle out front and tease the defenseman, more times they're going to take your lunch money away from you.
Right.
So make sure you're protecting with your shoulders and your body, and you're utilizing that. So when you split, right, you sheath the sword and you get the other shoulder in front of it. Okay, so your body's in between the stick and that defenseman. Try to deter that takeaway check. And I thought this question was going another way, so I got excited with the response, but I'm just going to go ahead and give it to you. Something I loved just from a stick protection and a feeding ability, if you go back and watch any Randy Stats highlight video, Randy Stats was a great Native American player that played at Syracuse, played with me in Atlanta this past year. You can see when he gets that GOE and that defenseman's kind of up on him on that bottom hand, trying to drive him away and post up, he's able to kind of hang his stick, get this bottom hand to that back pocket, and he feeds behind the back all day to cutters coming down. That's how we were successful as an offense this past year in Atlanta, was that we had great cutters. And when you're kind of posted up on your defenseman and you just have this stick in that backhand pocket and you can feed this way, there's no way to defend against that. There's no way for me to get a stick, on your hands or disrupt that pass because you have, kind of this outlet to make that feed. That's something I try to incorporate to my high schoolers game. Like we would practice, we would do drills where they're doing BTB feeds to cutters. I think that's an easy position that we all get into where we try to get to that 5-and-5 spot. Maybe we get stuck right at GLE. We have the defenseman kind of cross-checking our hips. Pull that stick back in between your shoulders, keep it away from them, and you have this option open to kind of feed. Completely random, but like my mind jumped to that when you're asking that question. I thought,
man, you're gonna kill me teaching these kids to throw a bunch of behind the back passes. It's gonna throw off all of our offenses. Man, the thing is, I love it as a coach when it works. But the issue is like the period of time in which the kids are learning it and they're just throwing it behind the back out of bounds or underhand. I love when Lyles Thompson came out with the cross arm pass, we get that one a lot now.
Yeah.
It's a fun one. So talk about this, like how important are your hands to you as a defender? Like I know you're a stronger guy, you like to shove people around. How important is that for, continuing to maintain position on your attackman?
Huge. And the biggest issue I find with, middle school and high school defensemen, something that you have to learn in college is it's not always a 50-50 cross check when you're trying to drive somebody out. There are times where, if I'm righty and they're going to their left hand trying to wrap around GOE, well, maybe I'm doing a top hand jam where it's 70-30%. So I'm using my hands and my body to leverage them away from the cage. By not always pushing them 50-50, sometimes you give them advantage by pushing their momentum upfield, trying to wrap around, get a 70-30 jam, and swing your hips around to get in front of them. I think hands are huge, and the ability to either do a butt end kind of hold or a top hand hold is massive, and something that everybody has to put in their arsenal, kind of for defensive techniques to be really good, in tight to the cage when you're trying to drive. Somebody's trying to drive on you and bull dodge. And you're trying to turn them or drive them up and away, being able to utilize different, 70-30 different percentages with both hands to kind of take them to an area of the field they don't want to go.
Right. No, that's really important stuff. Did you ever have any issues like when you got to college or even the professional level with like your stance or how you approach the ball that you had to fix? Or is there anything that you see that's common in young defensemen that you think needs to be kind of broken in terms of the habit?
I would say, I think in high school, every now and then when I would approach the ball behind, depending on what hand they were, I would kind of shift my body and take them to one direction. Now, whenever I match up, it's always squared. My toes are pointed towards the end line every single time I'm approaching somebody behind. But depending on if I want to take away top side to square up, if I'm approaching somebody, and I'm trying to take away top side, I always say, get your inside shoulder to their outside shoulder to make sure you overemphasize taking away that top side position. You're kind of shading them to go through X and go that long way around to the front of the cage. I think that's something I got much better at in college, was just learning always line my inside shoulder, my outside shoulder. And then from there, it depends, Are they a speed dodger to try to get in your body, or are they going to try to run around you? What's my first check going to be? Is it going to be a straight back pedal, or is it going to be kind of a drop step to open up? That all really kind of depends on the dodger. But I would say making sure I'm always, toes pointing towards the end line, whenever the ball is behind, and trying to make sure I take away top side just with my position, make sure inside shoulder to outside shoulder. All right. And then funneling them below.
Great. All right, so my man George here is actually asking a question on the same line here. So what types of things are important for him to do if he's dodging on you, and when he sees you take a big windup as a defenseman to throw a big check? Like, what's the best way for him to beat that when you're guarding him?
It depends on where you are on the field. All right, sometimes a great thing to do is inside roll or change of direction, because a lot of times when they try to throw that big check, they forget about their feet, and all they're worrying about is coming down with as much power as possible. Sometimes they forget about that extra step they may take if you plant and you change direction. Or you can get into their body. I mean, if you see them wind up and you get into their body and try to drive them and bull dodge them away, well, they can't throw that check on you. And I think that's what I hate the most as a defenseman, is when that attackman gets into my body in certain areas of the field where I don't want that to happen. Along GOE, I want to be at their hips. But, if they're just sprinting and dodging below GOE, east-west, that's where I want to throw stick checks. And that's where I want to have 6 feet of separation. So if I'm trying to throw a huge check and you get into my body, and then you can roll outside of that and try to get top side, better, right? I think the more you take advantage of that lag time of really getting that baseball swing that won't hit you, right? Just take advantage of that, split, change direction, get into their body, or just move away.
So I don't remember if you know, or I don't know if you remember this, but I guess it was our senior year. We played that one time over at East, and I think it came down towards the end of the game. So it was only like a 2 or 3 goal game, and I think you guys pulled the goalie to double. And the only time I ever remember beating you was you trying to go for a big wind-up check, and I ran past you on a roll dodge, and I missed the open goal. So
I don't remember that, but good.
I technically beat you, but I feel like an idiot. So let me ask you this. What are the best footwork drills to be doing right now? And I'll combine this. We got another kid, Nathan Garber, who wants to know what's the best way to stay fit at home. What are the best footwork drills that you're doing? And, what other things should he be doing to be staying fit?
So that's actually kind of my area of expertise outside of lacrosse, because I am a strength and conditioning coach. Ladders are good for neuromuscular coordination to get you that movement patterning. They do not build speed. No way do they build speed. All you have to do is look at the hips. The hips don't move anywhere. It's just the feet. When you want to build speed, you have to have great strength, right? You need a lot of power production into your legs. The more plyometrics and like just jumps and hops you can do. So a jump is off of 2 legs, a hop is off of 1. Look up plyometrics, do plyos, because that's what's going to change your game. Plyometrics is the bridge between speed and strength. And so if you can build that bridge, right, whatever strength gains you make in the gym, that's going to translate to the field. But just doing agility ladder all day, that's not going to make you fast. What makes you fast is putting a lot of force quickly into the ground, all right, repetitively. Okay, you can't build that in a speed ladder. That's got to be done with, Olympic lifting. It's got to be done with a lot of single leg, like split squat, RDL exercises, and just different single leg and double leg jumps. Forward, straight up in the air as high as possible, to the side, all right, kind of all planes of movement. You do that more, the more force you can produce off the ground, the faster you're going to be. And that's all stuff you can do on your own. That's all body weight stuff, actually. Right. And so that's what I've been having my high school kids do. They have to sprint, short sprints, 3 to 4 times a week. They're going to do different hops and jumps, 3 to 4 times a week. And then at home, if you guys don't have any weights, filling a backpack up with books and doing, single leg squats, that's going to load up that one leg a lot more than doing a double leg squat. So the more books you can put in your backpack, the more strength you're going to gain, that single leg. So there's ways to be creative around it. You just have to be curious. I mean, the internet is undefeated. You can look up everything if you know the right questions to ask. Just be curious and always try to get better.
Right. So this is actually just something that's come up a couple times. And before I ask this, just plug for everyone who's listening. During this downtime, we've been writing workout plans through Hilltoppers for our players. If you guys haven't talked to us about either skill development stuff that you want to be doing, or strength development or speed development type things, please contact us and we'll help, find a way to help you get better during this time when you're working on your own. But for you, David, this group here is split pretty evenly between high school and middle school. And we have some really eager middle schoolers who I know, they really want to be the next you. They want to be playing pro lacrosse. And, I've heard kids saying like, hey, I need to be lifting now. And I know that, maybe there's different lines of thought, but, you don't need a 7th grader doing a bunch of bench press. What advice do you have for the younger guys who are wanting to physically develop more? I know you just talked about doing some of the body weight stuff. But what advice do you have for middle schoolers and also then for high schoolers on top of that?
For middle schoolers, when I'm training those kids, really I'm more worried about mastering movement patterns. So, you have a crawl, you have a jump, you have a roll, you have a squat, you have a hinge, you have a push, you have a pull, doing all those things. Just being able to, lunge to the side, lunge forward, lunge diagonally, go behind, like just mastering all planes of movement, at the middle school level is going to be huge, because that's where, these kids may not be as coordinated with their body. And so we can build a little bit of strength, but the most important thing is just being coordinated and mastering movement patterns. And so, the more forward lunges, backward lunges, side lunges, diagonal lunges, jumps in the air, just doing bear crawls forward and backward, rolling, all of these kind of basic exercises that we do in PE classes, those are huge. Just master those. And then once you get to the high school, when you want to put on a lot of lean mass and strength and power, that's when you can start hitting the weights. But the best thing is to just create a great foundation, and that foundation is just good movement. All right. Once you have good movement, then you can go on and start building strength in those movements and power. But it's really just, becoming coordinated at that age, especially as they're hitting puberty, they're growing,
right.
That changes, they can go through a growth spurt in 6 months and their coordination, takes a few steps back. So it's just a constant reevaluation and learning process for them at the middle school age.
Right. And again, guys, remember, your stick is one of the most important things too. So don't spend all your time, doing bicep curls and doing, workouts. Like if you go and lift and you go and run, spend a little time afterwards doing stick work when you're tired. That stuff will really help you out when you get to, the game. All right, I'll leave you with a final question here. This is from my man Patrick, a goalie. He wants to know if you ever played with Jacob Stover and what he's like. So I'll let you answer that one. I also want you to say, who was the best lacrosse player you ever guarded and why?
Okay. So first, yes, I played with Jacob Stover. He was a freshman when I was a 5th year. That's when we made our run to the Final Four. Man, goalies are weird. You guys know Jacob's one of them. I mean, I love the kid to death, but he's definitely a little odd. But I mean, he's one of the best straight shot stoppers I've ever played in front of. I mean, his ability to see the ball, throw his body in front of it, make saves. He did that at a very high level. I would say the best attackman I ever played against. I mean, the best name I ever had a one-on-one matchup with was Rob Pinnell. I mean, he's going to be who everybody knows. But I would say the hardest person I ever had to guard is Dylan Malloy, because he's a thick boy. I mean, when I guarded him, he had 30 pounds advantage on me, and he would just throw his body into me to create separation and then shoot off my hip. And so he bull dodged. He knew his strengths as a player. He's a big kid. He knew he's not speedy, but he can throw his shoulder into people and knock them down. So he was always lowering his shoulder, knock me back like 2 feet, and then shoot once he got separation. And that's huge. I mean, offensive players, you're going to have a lot of different qualities. If you can get your hands free, no matter what you do, you're going to have an opportunity to feed or shoot. Malloy was just able to bull dodge me and bully me to get his hands free. And it was just very hard to stop him. Rob Pinnell's, I mean, I can kind of speed. I mean, I can try to play my angles. When you have a 250-pound like running back in the NFL come and lower his shoulder against you, that's just hard to prepare for.
Right.
He's probably the hardest kid I've ever had to cover.
Man, well, that's pretty cool. All right, man. Well, we really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us. It's really cool to see one of the greatest lacrosse players come out of North Carolina, at least one of the best defensemen and pro guy and everything like that. And I think everything you've talked about has been extremely helpful. I even feel like I learned a lot. So, thank you so much for imparting that knowledge on us. And thanks for, I think, reinforcing some of the ideas that we've tried to put out to the kids and that they've heard a couple times here and there. So just big thanks to you. And if you have anything else you want to say, we can sign off here, and I'll shoot you a big thank you text after this.
Yeah. No, guys, thanks for having me. Again, guys, I love talking to players from North Carolina, right? I'm a North Carolina boy. It's special, and it's a special place in my heart. Keep just being great ambassadors to the sport. Give back to the younger levels. I mean, something I did in high school is I always come out Saturday mornings and help with the youth. Do that. It's great to pass on the knowledge that you're getting from Coach Circle and everybody else that's feeding you information. And just keep working hard. I love where North Carolina lacrosse is growing, and hopefully we can be one of those premier, states in the sport. So that starts with you guys. That's your journey.
Appreciate it, man.
All right, guys. Thank you so much.
Yeah, take care, dude.
All right. Take care.
Bye.